Hello, my name is Jonathan, and I'm gonna just be doing a tier list for the Rate Your Music's top 50 albums of all time. I've been on Rate Your Music since like 2013. I really didn't get super into it probably until like September, October of that year, where I kind of got more engagement with like the community, made a lot of friends there, got like obsessive about like discovering new music through there, looking at other people's like charts and finding stuff that I otherwise probably would have never heard of. And yeah, it was a really great way to like expand my tastes and all that. And even since I was a little kid, I've always been very like uh, obsessive with like canon. What the idea of canon, the idea of like these are the albums this person says that are like the best albums of all time, or this like journal, or anything like that. I've always found kind of like comparing, like having like a canon to be a really interesting concept. What it means for an album to be canonized, what it means for it to receive a certain level of critical or like popular acclaim, that it's considered an album that you, like as a music listener, like you should listen to, something like that. And obviously I think it's a good way to get into music. I think like in terms of like discovering things, like it's a pretty decent way to kind of start off listening to music and get an idea of what is out there, what just like different than what you've already just have happenstance been like exposed to by like family, friends, stuff like that. It's a good way to invest yourself in music. But obviously tastes change, and as you kind of develop more, I don't know, more exploration of music, the idea of like canonized albums does become a little bit stale, because a lot of times, I mean, if your top 50 albums of all time kind of look exactly like this, then it's kind of a little weird. I'm not weird, like there's nothing wrong with that. I just think these albums, it's more of like a gateway to, these are some ideas, these are albums that are detailed enough or like have enough acclaim that makes it very much worthwhile to invest your time to try to understand what makes it so popular, what makes it so critically acclaimed. And like even now, it's like some of these albums I love, some of them I can't stand, but at a certain time, most of these albums I've given enough, like a decent amount of thought to try to understand. I try to listen to multiple times over years to try to think like, oh, maybe I see it differently now. And, I feel comfortable now with my opinions on them and where I'm at dealing with these albums. But a lot of this stuff, I think maybe, who knows, maybe, let's say I get into Radiohead at 27 when I basically don't really like love their music since I was about like 16. It could happen. I'm okay with that. I don't care. Let's get started. Sorry, banging my coffee cup against the desk. I'm just gonna keep it in my hand this entire time and use it as a way to communicate, because I need my coffee to be able to talk about music. It's just natural. OK Computer is a C. I mean, I'm not like a Britpop person, not like an alt rock person. The best parts of this album is more progressive, more experimental, more kind of engaging with the overall themes of alienation, technology, and just being a being a creep. There's some really good songwriting though in this. Like I can't fault it for that. No matter what, like I mean, the best song there on this is definitely, I didn't even think of it, Paranoid Android, maybe. It's like the first, that sounds like a Janelle Monáe song, that Radiohead song, but it's gonna come up to me like probably some point in this video and I'll be like, I'm an idiot, but that's probably my favorite song on this thing. Yeah, Johnny Greenwood is a fantastic guitarist. He's definitely his contributions is probably my favorite aspect of Radiohead. And then I've kind of, hearing his like original soundtracks and stuff has kind of like singled him out even more so to me as like probably like the most like musically similar to like what I'm looking for in music. He's definitely that. Tom York is a wonderful song. I do think he's like a wonderful songwriter. I think he has a very specific voice that matches his like process of songwriting and what he puts out there. It just really isn't my cup of tea necessarily, but I can still listen to this album and still have a good time. Overall, I still like, outside of my own personal taste, I don't really get why this is the number one on Rateyourmusic. I don't really get it, but that's okay. It's probably not for me. It's probably for a lot of other people. So Big Butterfly is probably my favorite Kendrick Lamar by a huge margin. Actually, I love it's a really expansive album, and it goes in lots of different places, lots of different kinds of songs. Manages to still be fun, or like even have humor to it, while having a lot of more serious subject matter. And Kendrick Lamar has definitely found a very niche spot for where he exists in like the music industry, where he exists within like hip hop, to be someone that's can be considered like more of a conscious like artist. Definitely somebody that I think even like the mainstream listeners are like very invested in like his lyrics, what he has to say, and I think that's great. If you listen to him in context of like other hip hop artists or even like popular hip hop artists, he definitely stands out. He has a very unique voice, something like even like at some parts almost like parody of hip hop, the really like the higher end like nasally voice, kind of like repeating like these very like downbeat heavy like bars, stuff like that. So, but I love his sense of melody. I love the fact that these songs are like, he's huge like radio friendly songs, but they have like a very sing-songy kind of like odd melodic chorus to them sometimes. So yeah, I think Pimp a Butterfly is very much, I understand completely the acclaim it receives. I think it's great that it's on like the top 10 or even like it's number 2, honestly. It just I look for a lot of different things in hip hop that's not necessarily this, that makes more sound out. Like I'm a huge fan of like Little B. We're gonna talk about Mad Villainy later. Or definitely one a little bit definitely like Kendrick Lamar's a little bit of an oddball. I love the real oddballs of hip hop. Those are usually my favorite artists. So Wish You Were Here. Actually, let me rearrange this real quick. I forgot. I need to have a tier. I'm gonna just get rid of E. I don't understand. I never got graded by E in my life, or what even is E as a. It doesn't make sense to me. I understand everything else except E. Haven't heard. I have heard this. I hate it. Oh no, Shining on You Crazy Diamond's a good song. I'm literally putting it on there because I actually kind of enjoy Shining on You Crazy Diamond. Like the post like Dark Side of the Moon era Pink Floyd is basically just like the most boring prog ever. It's just more leaning towards like soft rock. Roger Waters' songwriting I've never been a fan of, and I feel like his songwriting is like in like the front, or like the kind of what is the main I don't want to say part, but like it's kind of the main focus of the music, with like the backing of like just like the most boring prog I've ever heard in my entire life. I like prog that's fast, complicated. It could be atonal, could be not, it could be, but I want it to be interesting. Is like literally the. There I go, throwing my coffee cup on the desk, hearing it bang. I don't think this album's interesting. I don't like the songs. I think it just bores me to death. And I'm sorry for my 8-year-old self that, had this, like, had a guitar tablature book of this and, like, Dark Side of the Moon, and memorized those songs, like, inside and out. I probably heard it, like, 100 times. Maybe that's why I don't like it now. Maybe that's why I find it boring. But it is what it is. That's where it's at. King Crimson in the Court. Can I not even think of names of these albums right now? Hold on a minute. Court of the Crimson King. Okay, I was just like, I was like, I forgot the name of the album for a second. I've heard this probably maybe 3 or 4 times. It's been probably at least 6 or 7 years since I've heard it, but I mean, it's just an amazing album. Like, the complete opposite of Wish You Were Here. This thing is surprising, it is gorgeous. The songwriting is the most underrated aspect of it by far. Like, the vocals, the delivery, the compositions are fantastic. The first song is obviously just like, just gets you going, like right off the bat. Like, you want to listen to the whole damn thing, because the first song is just, it's literally pure fire. It's a fantastic album. I absolutely adore the more, even like Baroque, like pop influences on this thing. And then, like, the more prog elements only benefit the songwriting. They're only working in tandem to elevate the material. That's great. It's a good album. Kid A's a B. This is probably my favorite Radiohead album. This and, like, the Amnesiac era is, like, I think the most interesting music they put out. The most, still, like, similar to, like, what my tastes are, what I'm looking for music now. You know, I kind of do have, like, a weird bent for more, like, ambient techno or IDM kind of, like, influence pop. It's not really pop, it's still, like, it's basically IDM for, like, that can be played potentially in, like, still, like, a stadium, which is kind of Radiohead's thing. You know, I mean, like, that's kind of Radiohead's, like, niche, in my opinion, what makes them so successful. But I love this. The title track, Kid A, is probably my favorite song on this one. Just, like, a really I love Vocaloid, Tom York, of course. I don't know why that's more popular, and that should be used in every album ever made from here on out is a Vocaloid of Tom York speaking, but it's a really beautiful composition, and I'm going to say composition like too many times. Sorry. I have like 15 words that I use to talk about music, and that's probably it. I think I first bought this CD when I was 14 from like kind of a bigger chain record store that's in like the Phoenix, Arizona area, and listened to it like a shit ton. I definitely prefer the A side to the B side. The B side sounds a little bit more like OK Computer, maybe just a little bit more less intricate, more like passionate, if that makes any sense. Like, they're definitely kind of more going through like more anxious, more, I don't want to say edgy, it's kind of edgy. Idiotech's a little edgy. That's a beautiful song still. Yeah. I don't know where else to go with this one. I like Kid A. I still think it holds up. It's another one I kind of understand it being like top 10 a little bit. I can kind of see where people like look at it and be like mind-blowing, because I was that person somewhat at one point. I've never actually been like a huge Radiohead fan, but in terms of like the first time I ever even like listened to an album that was primarily composed of like electronics, like that was Kid A. Like, it sounds crazy to think about now, but I thought rock was it at one point. So, thank you, Kid A. Loveless is an S. I adore this thing. I don't really like a lot of shoegaze. I honestly can't stand a lot of shoegaze. Shoegaze is just like a slightly prettier, but also like a lot of shoegaze kind of fits in the same category. It's like a lot of like post-rock for me, where it's just, I can't. Like, obviously, like, there's good stuff in both, yada yada. Those are like really broad genre categories, but like the bulk of like, oh yeah, like this is like what a shoegaze album sounds like. This is what a generic post-rock album sounds like. Those are just like actual, just garbage music. Loveless, on the other hand, is constantly daring. It's constantly like playing with expectations. The third song kind of like was the first song that like made me realize like how beautiful, like how brilliant this is, because I'm like, what the fuck is this? I've never heard anything like this. And then the fourth song comes in, and that's my personal favorite on the album, and it's just this absolute like whirlwind of like, you don't really understand what's synth, guitar, electronic, amplified, like it all kind of turns into a vacuum, but still, the musicianship is still there. The, I mean, it's just a extraordinarily. I mean, it's still an extraordinarily unique album, even in regards to shoegaze. Like, there's nothing that sounds like Shoeless. There's nothing that's done it quite like Shoeless, and that's because Shoeless can only. Oh, not Shoeless. Loveless can only be. I mean, it can only be done once. I mean, and that's it. Like, it kind of did that thing, and then that's it. You can just like, well, I have fuzzy sounding guitars and just the most boring generic chord progression, the most boring generic reverb vocals, and throw it out there and be like, yeah, we're just like Loveless. It's like, no, absolutely not. I mean, obviously there's a lot to Loveless involving, like how much it would cost to make at the time, like all this stuff, but yeah, still a really unique album. Definitely very much pushing forward what can be done in like popular music, because I do think, I mean, it still holds on to the ending. The last song sounds like it could be the end song of a high school movie, like not high school musical movie, but a generic high school whatever dramedy. Like it kind of has that weird vibe to it. Like there's still a lot of like very heavy like pop undertones of it, but it's just as progressive and as left field as something like that can be. And I still think, like, it's kind of a meme, like, people think, like, well, this is, like, the most experimental music you've ever heard at a certain point, which, yeah, I mean, it probably was for me at some point as well. But I don't think, just the fact that it's, like, a more canonized album, that it's more, like, Watson, like, it's one of the albums to listen to for Chan, Mew, Pitchfork, Rolling Stone, whatever. It's still, that shouldn't overshadow how much of a landmark album it is. Yeah, that's it. Mad Villainy. This is like this, Triple X, and Stankonia. Triple X, Danny Brown, and Stankonia, Outkast were like the three albums that got me into hip hop, like 14 or 15 years old. And then I think maybe Wu-Tang Clan, maybe like a year after. Like those are all like very kind of close together. Like obviously, I listened to all four of them non-stop. I had CDs of all of them. I like just constantly. Yeah, I was obsessed with it. Like it really clicked with me, and that was like the first time I ever listened to hip hop. Those four albums. Mad Villainy, I think now as I've listened to hip hop, for a while I grew kind of bored of it. Didn't quite see I didn't quite see the appeal of it until more recently again, kind of rediscovering my love for it. MF Doom and Madlib are really just like at the peak of their musical prowess at the time. Like they were really firing on all cylinders, making similar to Loveless. It's like, where does this album fit? Like experimental hip hop, abstract hip hop, conscious hip hop, backpacker hip hop, whatever. That's like the worst genre term like ever made. But yeah, it's unbelievable. I still think about Doritos, Fritos, or Cheetos all the time. The samples in this thing are just so inspired and so, unique, and yeah, it's just a classic. MF Doom, rest in peace. Like, what a really wonderful figure in hip hop. Truly unique, truly inspiring guy. Dark Side of the Moon is garbage. It's the worst. I kind of like The Great Gig in the Sky, but it kind of also reminds me of, like, it's kind of just like a rip-off of like that one Max Roach, like Freedom Suite. I mean, it didn't like trademark like a kind of like gospel-ish vocals like that are like almost screaming, yelling. They didn't really, or like Max Roach Freedom Suite is more like vocal jazz, but they didn't trademark that in 1960 when that album came out. But it sounds similar enough. I don't like it. I think this album's shit. Like, it's so obnoxious to listen to. Like, just like the thought of listening to Money again, just like, no, I can't do it. I mean, like I said before, like, I listened to this like 100 times as a kid. But I like, close my eyes and like This is like one of the first times like, wow, I can like listen to an album forward to back and they like connect and there's like a theme, and at the time it's cool. It's like any exposure to more music, it's not as boring. And I'm not just saying like I hate Pink Floyd. I have them like two bottoms. Like the Sid Barrett like first album is incredible, and I specifically remember like I watched the Live in Pompeii album or like concert. I think I was like 11 or 12 years old, and it like completely blew me away. Like they were, like I thought they were absolutely incredible. I thought the music was so interesting, and that was like a really, really good concert. Dude, I mean, they did like that duet with the dog. They were like, still not dedicating themselves to just making slightly elevated. Like it just sounds like this is just prog Eagles. That's all it is. And I can't stand the Eagles. This is just prog Eagles. So yeah, I can't do it. Abbey Road is like probably my least favorite of the like post Revolver, post like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band era of Beatles, where it's like they kind of stopped just doing like the Mercy Beat kind of, you know, goofy jingle jangle songs and kind of became a little bit more experimental, more interesting. Yeah, I just don't. I mean, actually no. Let It Be is my least favorite. This one's okay. I almost want to put it in C, but I don't want to listen to it. There's like a couple good. I mean, the thing is like it's just like really inconsistent. Like there's a couple tracks I probably like really enjoy, and then there's most of it that I would be kind of meh, and then some I actively dislike. Which I guess that's the definition of a C album, so I'll just put it in C. That's it. Ziggy Stardust, I haven't really actually like. I probably heard it back front to back once, but I honestly I don't remember it fairly enough to really rate it. I don't really like anything I've ever heard from David Bowie, which is weird. Even as like a kid, I never got into David Bowie. Didn't really. I mean, I kind of appreciate like some of like the songwriting, like chord structures being like really interesting for like rock. I like hated glam rock, loved glam rock, hated glam rock, and then now I'm back at a point where I kind of like glam rock again, which is, especially like early 70s glam rock. You know, I mean, last year I became like pretty obsessed with Sparks, like for like a third time, but this time probably the most, where I like listened to like everything in their discography and like got really into them. My son's favorite song of all time is "Dick Around." I'm gonna have some explaining to do when he goes to kindergarten, but Ziggy Stardust is okay, probably. Like I'm not gonna rate it still, but I think the song Ziggy Stardust, I probably heard it a million times because it was in like one of the Guitar Heroes that I played when I was a kid, and that's about it. So yeah, it's okay. So Mingus, The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is a life-changing album. Completely, you can look at like just. You can read a review, you can look at the genres, like the genre labels for this thing, see like spiritual, avant-garde, jazz, post-pop, whatever. You can read into this as much as you possibly want, but it will literally do nothing. It won't spoil the music in any way, sense, or form. Like, you put this on, it is surprising, it is violent, it's spiritual, it's completely like a huge elevation of like music as a medium that real, I guess, unparalleled in jazz and paralleled in rock. Like one of the best albums ever made. I know it deserves all the accolades that it receives. Yeah, like I honestly like I can't even like I've heard it probably 10 times. I can't go back and just think of like what even like a single section or like really. Like what's like a riff in it, or like what's like a motif, like what comes, like where does it play? I just know when I put it on, I am consumed by this until it ends. It's not something you can listen into the background and just kind of have going. It completely demands your attention and demands it in a way that's fulfilling. You know, it's not like demanding in a arduous or like difficult way. It's so full of wonderful music. So S. Mingus, the Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is full of wonderful music. That's my review. Man, alright, this is actually turning into an S ranking because Velvet Underground and Nico is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's hasn't dipped in what my opinion of it since I've heard it since I was 13. My first memory of hearing this was watching a show on VH1 Classic called The History of Rock. And it was a special episode on like art rock. You know, like they had Roxy Music, David Bowie. Those are just like in like early Pink Floyd. That was like some of what they were talking about on it. And they talked about the Velvet Underground, and I remember very specifically seeing the Andy Warhol footage, the flashing really quick black and white footage of their concert, or like them practicing, and I heard the guitar feedback, so like the little guitar feedback sound that comes on and run, 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 and it completely just like shattered my perception of music from there on. Like after that point, I thought, what the hell was that? What was that sound? That's the sound. They put that on the song. Like that doesn't make sense. Why like that song? That why would they keep that sound and not want to like change it or want to get rid of it? Like that's an accident, right? And yeah, that completely changed my life. I think it's kind of a weird album because it is a little uneven. There's definitely kind of two sides to it. There's like a more dream pop, like really gorgeous, like reverbed, wonderful songs, and then there's obviously the more avant-garde, experimental rock, maybe more John Cale versus influence versus like Lou Reed. It's hard to really gander. Like they really were a good collaboration, those two. But I think All Tomorrow's Parties is probably still my favorite song on this. I think that's the best combination of like both the kind of dream pop and the more strictly avant-garde things, more like Terry Riley influence kind of stuff. Yeah, this album, another one, deserves all the praise it gets. In Rainbows is like my least favorite Radiohead, besides like, I don't know, like Pablo Honey. I really don't like this album. Like this and Hail to the Thief, actually. I think I just get just really boring music. Yeah, I don't get any of the like emotional appeal to this. Any attempts of like any sort of like emotional connection, that's just fall flat for me. And I don't really hate on it too long. Like Dark Side of the Moon I can hate on just because it's like offensively boring. This music isn't necessarily offensively boring. It's more just like very much not for me. So it's okay. I'm literally one person. I'm fine with that. But yeah, I just don't like it. Don't think it's... Yeah, it's really hard to just say I don't find it interesting. I don't connect with any of the songs. That's it. Remain in the Light is an S. Easy. This was another one that kind of had some like dips for me. The first time I've heard it, I was like 15. Thought it was pretty good. Didn't really get into Talking Heads for a little bit until like maybe 16 or 17. Listened to more of their discography and stuff. Listened to like Brian Eno's solo albums and like kind of saw like his influence on the album, things like that. It wasn't until more like even like 2 years ago when I was like, oh, wait a second now. The John Hassel trumpet solo, Adrian Blue guitar solos, I really enjoy obviously the first like 4 tracks is just like, there's so much like building anticipation until like Once in a Lifetime, which has like probably the strongest chorus and like a really, very memorable bass line. And it's just like such an odd song to, eventually be like their biggest hit besides like Burning Down the House, which is incredible. There's a song on this album that was a hit. Then the B-side's just kind of like weird, kind of more moody, but it's also still almost just as good as the A-side in my opinion. I really think, Brian Eno, David Byrne at the time definitely really just, this is like a revolutionary album for sure. The fact it came out in 1979 like doesn't even like register with me as like something that doesn't make sense in terms of like music history. That's just like, that's like finding a iPhone in the 60s. Like, what the fuck does that... No, it shouldn't be there, but it is there, and it's great. This is some of the best songs, best music ever made. Love Supreme, Coltrane. B for now. I've only I kind of did listen to jazz kind of weird. I kind of started off listening to a lot of like really fucked up experimental jazz, and then kind of then like even like years after doing that, kind of went back and like, all right, I should probably listen to Miles Davis, John Coltrane, like some more of the regular canon dudes. And I like A Love Supreme. I think in terms of like avant-garde jazz and like spiritual jazz, it doesn't really like hit me as much as like some other albums. But like, I mean, it's very clearly like a really like wonderful piece of music. I think that's all I'll say about it. I need to give it more listens. I've only heard it maybe twice. And one of those times I was just like walking my kids around like our little like neighborhood and just like played it from my phone. So that's not really a good listen. So yeah, need more time to it. Revolver is probably my favorite Beatles album. Yeah, this is my favorite Beatles album. It kind of hits. I don't know why. I mean, a lot of these songs, it's hard to like judge them now, just because, you know, just as a kid I listened a lot to just the Beach Boys and the Beatles, and I thought that was like maybe Stevie Wonder, and I thought that was music. So I was like, that's it. That's all the music there is. Then it was like, what? There's a radio, and then sister gave me a CD player, and like, and it had our CDs as like American Idiot on it. That's how I learned about music. So. But yeah, Revolver is a great album. It's just a really fun, catchy, psychedelic pop kind of ordeal. Yeah, it's great riffs. I think Taxman's the first song. That song kind of hits. That's all I'll say. Good Kid, Mad City. It's like a C. It's kind of overlong for me. And kind of a little like maybe, I don't want to say too much filler. I do think like, yeah, it makes sense as a concept. Everything has its like place and like purpose. I don't know, I listened to this a bunch when it came out. I was still in high school, and Kendrick Lamar was definitely the like, for the, like, suburban white kid, like, I listen to hip-hop now. I understand hip-hop now. Like, get that album. Not to say, that has nothing to do with the album more so, it's just, like, where it just happened to come out, culture, time, like, place, whatever, that it would appeal to like that specific group of people, and I was that person, so fair enough. Listening back into it now, I don't really. I mean, I enjoy it, but it doesn't. So like I said, it's not conceptually. I think it's interesting, but it's not really for me. It's definitely not a hip hop album for me. And that the particular like sound of like hip hop of that era doesn't really interest me as much anymore. And like I said before, like a lot of the same things about like To Pimp a Butterfly, except not as good. Kendrick Lamar's kind of like idiosyncrasies is still present on this album. Like there's like the climax of the album, in my opinion, where his like voice is like so high, it's like raspy, and he's just like rapping almost out of breath. I think that's a really good part. But yeah, that's Good Kid, Mad City. I don't really like the last song in this thing too. I don't give a fuck about was it Dr. Dre on it? Yeah, I don't really care. Kind of Blue. This is another one that's like A Love Supreme. I've only even really heard it for the first time very recently, and one of those times walking my kids around our neighborhood, just having it on my phone speaker. So I can't say much. I do enjoy it, but I don't really see like it didn't like stand out to me the first time I like gave it like a really dedicated listen. Like I didn't really understand why it's like kind of as historically important as it is in music history. So like I've already heard some of the later like jazz fusion Miles Davis, and that shit slaps. So this kind of seems weird to hear after hearing that stuff. Black Sabbath Paranoid is a C. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to detach my like nostalgic love for this album from it. Another one I can remember, I had the guitar tablature book for. I like played it from back to like beginning to end all the time. Thought it was cool. I think the first Black Sabbath album is better. It's weird. Title track Black Sabbath is fucking great. And yeah, these are some weird guys. Like, I love the fact that they got popular and kind of invented a genre, because it's just like a bunch of weird dudes got together that could play blues like really efficiently and just made it their own thing. And that's awesome. You know, I think, yeah, that's all I'll say. Again, there's like the classic riffs. I don't want to listen to Iron Man again. I'm sorry. You know, guitars ruined that for me. That's not the song's fault. Or Pigs slaps. That's that's a really cool song. And if I don't remember if Fairies Wear Boots is on this or the first album. That's one of my favorite. That's my favorite Black Sabbath song. I love like each guitar riff in that song. It's just like, so good. Yeah, I like it. I haven't listened to Nas. I don't know. I've maybe heard like 2 songs from Nas my whole life. Doesn't really. Yeah, not really the hip hop I want to get into. Yeah, that's about it. I don't talk too much about it. Like I said, I haven't heard it. Just hasn't really appealed to me. I know friends of mine that love it, but yeah. Godspeed, you Black Emperor. Lift your hands. This used to be like Godspeed, you Black Emperor was a really important band to me. Like around like 13 or 14, I think, for like discovering. I mean, still more like out there music or experimental music. I do think I hated Godspeed You Black Emperor for like a little bit, but I've kind of grown to appreciate them more recently again. This is definitely, F sharp H sharp is definitely my favorite though. I think that is on this list still. No. Wait. No, there it is. Yeah, it's still on this list, so I'll talk about it then. I think this one kind of falls into a lot of the trappings of post-rock that I don't really enjoy. Kind of like excessive, like really predictable crescendos. I do think, this album's too long, in my opinion. I think some of the, it doesn't have as, I mean, I like the kind of the theme of it, the kind of like ascending, kind of spiritual, but also, it's less apocalyptic sounding than F sharp, A sharp, which is nice, but is overshadowed by how fucking good and how interesting F sharp, A sharp is. There's definitely not as many moments in this that stand out to me as like really interesting compositionally that there is on the other album that I'm constantly comparing it to. So there's that. Pet Sounds is an A. Brian Wilson is definitely a really interesting character, or like really interesting, a prolific person in music. No, not a character, obviously a person. Kind of exists as a character, considering of how much is written about him, how much is like kind of known about what he was going through at the time, his history, like his own like mental health struggles. But this is just very plainly put, absolutely gorgeous songs, absolutely gorgeous recording style that was obviously very much influenced by like the Phil Spector Wall of Sound prior to this, and that's about it. Obviously these songs are extremely heartfelt and tackle a lot of really heavy emotions in a popular music context, which is really impressive. And obviously probably like, I mean, this isn't the first time it's ever been done, but it's possibly like the best time it's ever been done is pop song sounds happy but sad. Like, this is the best album that's ever done that for that, and hasn't done it in a way like I made. Obviously the way I said it seems like there's no depth to it, but there's an incredible amount of depth to the emotions put into this music, and that is heard in every part of Pet Sounds. So A tier. Not quite S tier for me. It just doesn't have the same significance in my life that has like kind of stood the test of time. You know, like everything above, like B and A, I would consider like music I still enjoy now, but it doesn't really like, I can't really look back at it and see like I've consistently loved it for this amount of time. I'm just like, I would listen to it again. I enjoy it. A is like, I love it. I'm like listening to it again. But then S tier, music that's been with me for like a lot of it over like a decade and has been consistently loved that whole time. Red I haven't heard, which is disappointing because I probably love it. Like I've heard like snippets of it or like maybe like a song or two, and I was like, yeah, this is like totally my jam. It's just like really like serious, complicated rock music, which is definitely my jam. Like I don't even think there's no vocals, there's no nothing like that. Like the like in the Court of the Crimson King to me it's still like a Baroque pop album. I don't know why I fucking think that, but like it kind of feels like that for me somehow in my memory. Like what it sticks out to. Like this just seems like very serious rock music, which is cool. Wu-Tang is an A. Like it's almost an S tier. It's definitely like the best like group hip hop album ever made. It isn't quite. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like why it's not an S. This is one I have to like almost, because it's perfect. It's literally a perfect album. The only reason why it's on an S is just like pure personal like. I mean, obviously all this is personal, but it's on an S just because just where it like aligns or like intersects with like my own taste in hip hop or my own taste in music. I think. I mean, there's so many memorable quotes, and the beats are insane. I mean, just the idea of just like these little like weird atonal like piano snippets being like cut and looped like that was so brilliant, and there's so much like personality on this thing. Great album, definitely like probably like the best, one of the best albums to like get into hip hop, but then also if you love hip hop. It is still, I mean, it only becomes more appreciated the more, like, love for hip-hop you have, in my opinion. Nick Drake, Pink Moon. These are good songs. I understand, you know, like the kind of significance of it being, like, the last thing he put out before, I believe, committed suicide. And the songs are really gorgeous, and he had a really beautiful voice. I actually prefer the more, orchestra. I'm not a huge fan of just like the hymn solo like guitar as much as like the side of Dick Drake. I actually prefer like guitar, but like I like the orchestration. I like the bigger tracks. I think that matches really well with his voice. You know, it kind of elevates his voice more so than just like a solo guitar thing. That's pretty much it though. These are I think the best songs he wrote, kind of back to back in like an album though. But yeah, the album before this, I think I still prefer a little bit because of that reason. The Cure, Disintegration, it's probably another C. It's kind of slow and boring, and it's not like as, like the, I don't know, the like sound design isn't really interesting enough to kind of justify like how slow each song is. Like a lot of it now today sounds just like kind of default like keyboard like yeah, pretty basic sounds, but obviously the songwriting's really good on this thing. I do like The Cure. I think The Cure is a good band, and yeah, I think and my emotional attachment to this album is definitely kind of, I probably wouldn't like this album as much if it wasn't for like a very specific memory of like when I was a teenager, like my uncle like passed away suddenly. He was someone I grew up with pretty close to, and I listened to this like a bunch when that happened. I was like, I need to be like have my sad music to kind of process grief. And actually, in that sense, it's like a really good album. So good for that. Musically, is definitely like really far away from like what I'm looking for in an album. This is almost an A. I like Jeff Wiggins' voice. I love that this album is basically like one of the all-time being weird and freaky and horny on Maine albums. Like he really does put it all out there. I mean, just slightly metaphorical, but it's a lot of weird stuff in his album. A lot of weird imagery, a lot of weird concepts, ideas. And he just rolls with it, and that's actually pretty sick. I think his songwriting is, chord progression wise, is probably the weakest, absolutely like the weakest part of this album. Like it's just really standard, like pick up a guitar, kind of learn like a lot of basic chords, kind of throw it out there kind of stuff. That's a huge disappointment. Obviously, I think his vocals and lyrics elevated quite a bit. The backing band is like probably my favorite. One might be my favorite part of this album besides like the lyrical content. I think the backing band, kind of like big orchestral, like circus, almost like psychedelic pop or like rock pop kind of theme stuff is just like perfect. It really elevates the music, and like the two like instrumental tracks, like it just shows like how on point they are and like how much the room they had to shine. Yeah, my biggest gripe is just like the chord progressions on this thing are really boring. Sorry, but that's it. I still think it's a great album though. I enjoy it. It's nice that at the time I listened to it like 100 times, and now like I hear back and it sounds so familiar, and I'm able to revisit like the more complicated like themes and like ideas that it kind of puts out there pretty quickly because I'm that familiar with it. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is a B. This is like a B. This is like a B minus. Listen to this shit non-stop as a kid. Like, this was my favorite album when I was like 6 years old. Thought it was the coolest thing I've ever heard. And now I still think it kind of holds up more so than a lot of Beatles albums. I think there's a lot of like I like it's goofy as hell. It's so goofy. It's a goofy, poor little British guy, goofy album. John Lennon, Paul McCartney. I love the Paul McCartney tracks in this thing a lot. They're really good. Kind of back and forth between their kind of musical styles, their songwriting styles, the grand scope of the album, the theme. Obviously, I can't think of it. A Day in the Life, one of the best songs the Beatles ever wrote, for sure, like without a doubt. Yeah, good stuff. There's that like one sitar song that's kind of, yikes. It's like, yeah, we get it. Go to India for a little bit, but it's like really bland and uninteresting. They had better songs than that. So yeah, but I think this holds up. I still think it's like interesting. That's it. Spiderland. Yeah, I put an A. There's a time I think maybe I put this in S. This is kind of another album, almost similar to Loveless in terms of like, yeah, it's like considered post-rock, but it's just like a million times more interesting, a million times more thought-provoking, and very clearly like, you can take ideas from this, but you can't replicate what they're doing because it's just, they already did it, and that's that. And that makes sense. Like, it's it's a product of musicians having a very specific idea of a kind of an atmosphere or an idea of what music they want to make or what thoughts and like ideas they want to provoke, and then just knocking it completely out of the park. Like mood, aesthetic, every part of this album like really does capture this kind of really atonal, suspenseful, odd, spiritual, almost, but like it's almost like if you were to watch like some like the old classic horror movies, like the black and white ones, or even like Vampire, more obviously, this album very much reminds you of Vampire, the Carl Theodor Dreyer movie. But like if you were to take DMX or something, or not DMX, DXM? DXM. If you were to drink a lot of cough syrup and watch it, it would kind of feel like listening to this. This is, oh my god, I just did the YouTube comment, what were they on drugs when they made this? Sort of things. This sounds like music to get high to, but I would get high to this album. I don't do a lot of drugs, but I'll fuck around and listen to it. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is a B. I think. Yeah, this is a good album. It's almost an A. I'm actually kind of, I love listening to this thing, honestly. It's such a like celebration of ego, as well as like the faults of ego as well. Like it's almost very much shows, I mean, it's very honest, it's very upfront, and that's kind of what makes it interesting in my opinion. So I mean, the production on this thing is just like absolutely incredible. Kanye's verses on it are hilariously quotable for some people might think bad reasons, so, but I think still really good. And I love the like amount of collaborations, the amount of like other people outshining Kanye on this thing is kind of hilarious. Most people outshine Kanye when they're on this album. It's possibly like the funniest thing about it, considering it's kind of like him kind of creating and also like embellishing upon like himself as a figure in pop culture, a celebrity, what those two things mean. Obviously, right now there's a lot of shit kind of going in the background with Kanye West, and that's a whole fucking mess, but I still think this is a great album. I think Kanye West mostly has made really great music. That's it. Animals. Another D. I think I kind of like Sheep. I think that song's kind of cool. I always prefer David Gilmour's songwriting and like voice compared to Roger Waters, but I don't want to listen to this again. I'm gonna listen to Sheep again. Everything else, it's just so long, drawn out, boring, spacey in like the worst way. That's it. White Album is good. I fuck with the White Album again. I think I like the White Album's super messy. I like really messy. I like it when an album is long, messy, and does like a bunch of different things. Like really takes a lot of different ideas and kind of runs with it. Even if it's like there's a lot of inconsistencies, I just find that kind of like structure for an album to be really good. Like one of my favorite albums of all time is Blueberry Boat, which I'll probably do another one of these. That's just like my personal favorite albums, just to have an excuse to talk about music I like, because I like talking about music I like, especially like the ones that I still like right currently like today think are my favorite. But yeah, White Album is still fantastic. I like, man, I actually like a lot of Beatles. Huh, I'm alright with that. I don't know what to say else about the White Album. I think that's the most interesting thing about it is just like, yeah, like how long over the like expansive and how many different places it goes. A lot of inconsistencies, but that's what makes it fun. In a Silent Way is a B. I won't talk about this one too long. I do think at one point like I heard it and I was like, this is absolutely incredible, and then it hasn't ever reached that point for me. It's almost like it's just it's I don't know, it's really strange. Like I heard it once and I thought this is like the most beautiful music ever. It's like Talk Talk, like their last two albums, like Spirit of Eden, Laughing Stock kind of stuff. But like back in like late 60s, holy shit, it's amazing. And then it just like never really clicked with me the same way. I probably need to just give it another chance. Maybe just like listen to it while like taking a walk out at night. That probably is all I need. I mean, it's in a silent way, but it kind of evokes kind of like a darker, more atmospheric, more ambient kind of atmosphere. Yeah. Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures. This like doesn't click with me at all. It never has. I've listened to it probably 3 times, like at like years apart, and I'm just like so really bored. Doesn't emotionally connect with me in any way. I kind of hate driving bass lines. Yeah, I gotta do it. I think Ian Curtis is an interesting vocalist. Some like interesting lyrical material. I should like him. I don't know. I love Shoo Shoo, and Jamie Stewart talks about Ian Curtis all the time. Big influence or whatever, but Shoo Shoo's obviously a different bag. I like their second album more. I like Closer. That one actually connected with me a couple times when I've heard it. I don't think I've ever heard this particular Smith's album from front to back. I pretty much have only heard like Hateful of Hollow and like the debut album for some reason. And I know like Hateful of Hollow is just like a compilation, I guess. But I like the Smiths. I kind of love the Smiths. I think Johnny Marr and Morrissey are like a really interesting duo together. And also, I mean, it can't be understated. Like, yeah, this is jingle pop, but these are complex, very rhythmically dense songs with very interesting vocals. Like, or not like the melodies. He's kind of like wisping out. It almost seems like he's like bringing them out of thin air over these tracks, and it's all very intricately layered. And I don't know how it works. Like, it really, I can't think of another like jingle pop kind of band that like has made it work like them. There probably is out there somewhere, but yeah, I really like the Smiths. Obviously, I'm not gonna talk about Morrison. I don't give a shit, but Smiths is good. I haven't listened to any Bob Dylan. I'll just put both of these here because I've heard like a Rolling Stone, and that's like the only Bob Dylan song I've ever heard. So. I love I love the fact that I've listened to so much music and for so long. Yeah, I have like these really big gaps in just like canon music knowledge, and I might never listen to Bob Dylan until forever, and I'm okay with that. I think it's funny. Don't really have an interest of listening to him. I like especially for like any sort of folk music. I really like either like melodic, sad, slow moving, almost like proto like twee pop kind of folk music. So, sorry, Bob Dylan, you're not twee at all. This is a great album. I love Fisherman's. It's actually, I put it in B because I have other albums of theirs I like way more than this one. But this is really good. I mean, it's just like, I think it's just like, yeah, it's 30 minutes long, but it's just one piece. But it goes a lot of interesting places, that they didn't really explore prior to this, despite the fact that they were a band that were always like kind of pushing themselves on like each album. Oh yeah, they're kind of like, definitely a huge fan of their like almost reggae, dream pop kind of like really out there stuff. Yeah, fantastic musicians. And obviously the vocalist, bass player is like extremely talented. Like one of the best vocalists in music that I don't know that I've ever heard. Hounds of Love is an A. I have a complicated relationship with Kate Bush. I don't really have like, I think The Dreaming is probably my favorite album. I adore Kate Bush, but I can't really like pick a full length that like I love front to back, if that makes sense. Like, obviously this is a masterful album. I love this album. But out there in my mind, I have like the perfect Kate Bush album that's just like bits and pieces of all the albums I've heard of hers that I love combined, and it's just like the S tier album that exists within her discography. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I don't love all of her albums. Any of her albums like consistent enough to be S tier, but there's bits and pieces of her albums that if they were like together somehow, in my mind, would be S. I think, yeah, huge resurgence of Kate Bush this year, which is really cool. Don't watch Stranger Things, but it's cool. And just, yeah, it's a good thing. Good for her. Vespertine is an A. I need to re-listen to this again. I think a friend of mine sent me a song off of it. Starts with an I. Okay, 1 second. Let me just see the track list. Unison. Yeah, a friend of me sent me Unison again. And I was like, oh my god, like, that's really gorgeous. And then I listened to like Cocoon, and I'm like, this is like the best sounding synths ever. So probably need to listen to this again. I still think my favorite album of hers is Debut, which is weird because I mean it was the one I liked the least for like the longest period of time. But now weirdly enough, I love that like weird like I don't know, art pop over like house music is great. Like it's a really unique album, and it's really beautiful. It's really fun, really fresh, and it still sounds fresh now. I think I mean obviously she kind of explored many different areas in her music over the years, and like I could do like a tier list about Bjork albums and talk probably like half an hour, 45 minutes about them. But Vespertine is definitely the best album, possibly about, maybe mostly about sex I've ever heard. Bjork's the only musician that should ever be allowed to talk about sex from now on. That's what I'll say about it. Doolittle's a B. This is just like Like, most indie rock is bad, but Doolittle is good. Doolittle is, I mean, I love Frank Black's voice. I love his, like, the way he puts his vocals over these tracks. I think the backing, like, I'm really not interested in, like, what the band is doing at all. Don't really care for, like, the guitar pieces. Don't really care much for the bass line, besides the fact that those two things do, like, kind of insinuate the eccentricities of Frank Black's voice and his songwriting. That's about it. I'm not gonna say too much else. It's just, like, a really solid, like, there's a lot of really good tracks on this thing, and it's a really solid, really good, interesting indie rock album, which, so, I mean, that's almost like an oxymoron. Portishead, I haven't really listened to this all the way through. If I have, I don't remember. But I don't really like Portishead. I don't like, I don't know, just trip hop was spoiled for my brain at some point. I don't know when. But it was. Sorry. Low. Yeah, I do remember listening to this, like, once or twice, and it went from, like, beginning to end, and now I'm just like, I don't care about a single thing that I just experienced. Don't get it at all. Don't know why. I mean, I do know, like, I believe that this is, like, yeah, Brian Eno was, like, collaborating with him, like, oh yeah, Brian Eno collaborated here, but, like, why do all these songs change my life, and not a single one of these things, like, does anything for me? That's it. Songs in the Key of Life. Like, so this was kind of, like, musical bringing a little bit. This, Beach Boys and the Beatles, so, like, my parents at some point were like, oh yeah, that's what you should show your kids to have a good upbringing of music, so that's what they did. And, like, fair enough, parents. Cool, I make my son listen to, like, weird shit. Sorry, son, I'm gonna ruin his ability to relate to his peers forever. No, but I think, I can't say I've listened to this thing all the way through. I mean, I've probably heard many songs off it many times, but I like Stevie Wonder. I think there's way better funk and soul musicians, way better funk and soul, like, albums that are way more interesting, that I prefer to listen to than this. All of this just kind of sounds like really milquetoast, really bland, and not as interesting from, like, my memory of, like, the songs I have heard. But maybe I'm wrong, and I think I'm not putting it in, like, D or F, because, well, F is just, like, you don't have, like, that's just not nice. Just Stevie Wonder. D would be probably where I would put it if I felt like I had, like, a more secure, like, memory of, like, what each song sounded like, or memory of listening to it all the way through. But yeah, that's that. Led Zeppelin 4 is a D. Don't want to hear fucking Stairway to Heaven ever again. Wayne's Rule got it right. But, Black Dog, too, just shitty song. Favorite song on his Misty Mountain Hop. Love that weird, half-step, melody or over, like, the really, like, tight, like, guitar riff and drum, like, rhythm section. I think that song kind of slaps. That's about it. I think this has, like, the one, like, I kind of like their folky side a little bit. I think that's kind of cool. It's very much, like, it's not like, it's like they kind of dabbled in it. It wasn't, like, their main, obviously not their main, thing that they were going for. They were just the hard rock dudes. But I like their folky stuff a little bit. Oops, another Bob Dylan. Itches, Bruise, and A. I probably need to hear it more, and it would just slip layered up in the ass. This thing just fucking hits so freaking hard. From beginning to end, it is just... Oh, man. Alright, this is gonna be like 15 hours long, and it'll be just as good. It's just the best. It just sounds like the best jam session you've ever heard, and it's horrifying. It creates such. I mean, this generic music way to describe things. It creates a unique atmosphere, but it really. I like the atmosphere it creates. I could live in this world forever, and it's fantastic. What's his name? John... I almost said John Mulaney. He's not on this fucking album. John McLaughlin, the guitar... I believe he's the guitarist in this, and he did, like, the more jazz fusion. He had a lot of like jazz fusion stuff throughout the 70s, but he is just incredible on this thing, just legendary. Uh, Miles Davis with the wah wah pedal is probably like top 10 best instruments, best player instrument combinations ever. F sharp, A sharp. Love this album. This is like, when I think about this album, I usually just think about like the ending, the like more folksy like ending to like the first track. It's so beautiful, and like the story spoken word parts are so memorable and so like give like such vivid like visualizations. And yeah, this was like kind of before I felt like post rock was kind of its own worst enemy in a lot of ways. It felt like a lot of the ways like these albums were trying to like build emotional like stir up within you kind of felt like really cheapened, or just like movie OST kind of like composition 101. So this album's still like a absolutely like incredible musical achievement, and this one still holds up. Out of the Godspeeds, this is my favorite. Television, Marky Moon. I like the guitars. That's the only thing I can really say about the song. Like the dueling guitars, like interplay between them, I absolutely love. I don't like the songs as much. I don't like anything else besides the interplay between the two guitarists. That's it. Sorry. That's all I'll say about it. I'm not gonna get. I've heard it like maybe 2 or 3 times, and like the only reason why I listen to it more than once is because it's like on so many like top 50 albums of all time lists. That's it. And the only thing that stands out to me is the guitars. This I've heard once, and I didn't get it at all, almost to the point where I'm just going to put it in F. Yeah, I don't get this at all. I have no idea what the appeal is. I've only heard it once. Like maybe back in like 2014. Yeah, I'll put it in D. Fuck it. I can't tell you like a single idea or sound on this whole thing besides boom, cha. Fuck it. F. I don't care anymore. Anyway, Rateyourmusic's top 50 albums of all time. This is kind of where I'm at in terms of where I kind of would have to place these albums on a tier list. That's the name of the video. However, I think there is like a lot of good stuff in here. I definitely am a lot more interested looking back at like canon. I'm a very big fan of like, you know, making a list of like, oh, this is like my top 20 of like this year, or like top 100 of a decade. Like I love making those sort of things. I know they're kind of arbitrary, they're kind of useless. They're kind of just like, I don't know, I enjoy it. I like the way it makes my brain feel to do those things. So, and I think a lot of people kind of feel that way. That's why like tier lists and stuff exist, and people like to like look at things like this. Like these albums, a lot of them have very little to do with each other, but besides the fact, the most unifying factor is the fact that like Rateyourmusic is a big collective of people from all over the world, mostly obviously America, but whatever, all over the world. We all just rate your music. We all upload or like make artist profiles, and it's all like so much of the community is like user, not like, well, I wouldn't say user friendly, but brought up by user engagement, and that's kind of the format. And I think that's a really unique way to run a site, is, you know, giving like our community users the tools to, you know, create their own spaces, create their own communities. And I had like and I still do, like I have a lot of friends that people I've even met in real life that I met through Rateyourmusic that have become my friends for, you know, over a decade now. So, you know, thank you for that. And that's why I like, so like looking, like reflecting on these albums. You know, a lot of these things aren't really stuff that, a lot of the albums aren't really necessarily where my like musical taste is kind of bringing me nowadays, but, you know, I've heard a lot. I like to talk about music. So that's that. Thank you for listening or watching. Peace.